Yay!
All right, good morning.
Good morning. Wake the hell up.
I may not be as peppy this morning as I was yesterday. Shoo, buddy. All right, WTF CNN. Here's the front page. Here's the front page of CNN.com. Let's see. We got Trump impeachment, Trump shooting immigrants, some woman dancing with a lion, Boris Johnson. Oh, Gandhi, Amber Geiger, Megan Suze, US v France, Bison Gore. Chicago school forced a coatless boy out into the cold and lied about it. America's factories are getting crushed by Trump's trade war, not the Fed. That's bullshit. Why the Senate might remove Trump. Another wild day of the Trump-Ukraine. I don't see anything about China.
Well, specifically, Hong Kong.
So yesterday was the 70th anniversary of communist rule in China. And what happened was a protester was shot point blank range.
Today when police for the first
I don't care what you have to say, shiny blonde woman. Hong Kong protester shot by police at point blank range has been charged with assault. Okay. There's a couple things here. Now, that the protester was shot by a cop and then arrested and charged with assault. That one's kind of sticky. I would go so far as to say, I would point out that the officer should have the right to defend himself. Before we go all the way down the rabbit hole and China's evil and it's just murdering people at random. I won't go that far. I mean, screw China, no doubt.
Yeah, they're commies. Don't get it twisted.
But the protester coming up now, we don't have any idea how the protester. Oh, excuse me, guys. We don't have any idea.
Open it a little wider, you can catch flies.
We don't know how the protester assaulted the officer. What that looked like. I mean, for all we know, the officer may have just said, "Hey, screw that particular individual." Probably not. Protester shot by Hong Kong police officer during mass demonstrations on Tuesday has been arrested and charged with assaulting an officer and could face further charges for rioting. Now, here's the thing about the rioting. The whole Hong Kong China thing is a particularly sticky wicket. Hong Kong is part of China. Reverted back to China from the British in 91?
97.
97. It was more than 20 years ago. Yes, 20. I know. It hurts a little bit when you think about it. The 90s were more than 2 decades ago now. But all these protests began over the question of an extradition treaty, which, okay, Hong Kong is not a sovereign state. Hong Kong is part of China. But Hong Kong enjoys, and I'm not an expert on the particular politics and governances in Hong Kong and as it relates to China, but I do have a basic understanding. Hong Kong is part of China, but it enjoys a certain amount of independence as a result of having been a British colony and reverted to China, and it has its own separate government, most of which, as I understand it, is appointed by Beijing. So the protests began over this whole thing about a guy who was traveling and apparently committed a brutal murder and then went back to Hong Kong. And I forget if it was if it was Taiwan or Thailand. I think it was Thailand. Oh,
I mean, let's be honest. It's probably
it doesn't
Thailand.
matter.
Well, I mean, Thailand is what happens if Vegas is a country.
So basically, homeboy goes and he's having a good time with his girlfriend, and then apparently brutally murders her and chops her up and puts her in a suitcase and brings her back to Hong Kong. So the offended nation is seeking extradition, and China steps in and says, "Yeah, we'll extradite him for you." And Hong Kong says, "Whoa." Now, I don't think anybody here is saying that the murderer should get away with murdering. What is being said, however, is not dissimilar to, let's say, Great Britain telling the European Union that the EU does not get to arbitrarily decide that Great Britain suddenly has an extradition agreement with Russia, right? It'd be like, no, I don't want to stretch the analogy too far. But basically, if you concede the authority to arbitrarily decide extradition to an external authority, then you've set a precedent of conceding authority. When the Chinese response was so over the top to the demonstrations, the original protests against that, then the protests escalated and the demonstrators started making more demands. Among those demands, they want to elect their own officials, and they want to oust their current leadership. Now, that's all pretty substantial. But hey, CNN, WTF?
Orange man bad.
Orange man bad, orange man bad, orange man bad, orange man. That's all you got. Yeah,
Yeah, well, there's two things at play
this
here.
shit matters.
There's two things at play here. TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, has reached such a fever pitch that even though I have said that I think this impeachment thing is going to happen, it's got to be pointed out that we're only at the inquiry phase. The House has not yet taken up official articles of impeachment, and they're treating it as though, man, this is a done deal. Trump is currently being impeached.
Yeah, and you'll note that all of the major Democratic players, they won't actually say the words, we have initiated articles of impeachment. But they're doing everything they can to suggest it so that they can go ahead and start running on the claim we are impeaching President Trump. They're not there yet. Now, don't get me wrong. I just about lay a paycheck against you that the Donald will be impeached by the House. But it'll be a cold day in hell when he's removed from office by that.
I don't know. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but I mean, what, we're going to trust the Republican Party to do the right thing under the face of intense media pressure? I don't know, buddy. I don't know.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I've said it before. I vote Republican because they fail slightly slower. I don't have a lot of faith in the party.
Yeah.
They're weak.
But here's the other side to it, and I think this is one of the big reasons why these protests are not being covered. The first is the principle of the matter. The fact that we have to go through the nuance and explain, look, it's not that Hong Kong is cool with people brutally murdering their girlfriends and then chopping up their bodies and stuffing them into suitcases.
Right.
I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that Hong Kong is not okay with that kind of behavior. But what Hong Kong understands is the nature of liberty, the nature of authority. They don't have an extradition treaty worked out with the offended host nation. And just like, let's say China came to us and said, hey, Cameron Anderson, that's me, committed a crime. Well, we have got treaties worked out with China and says, okay, we'll extradite Cameron to you, but it has to be under these conditions. Well, Hong Kong doesn't have anything worked out. And they understand that once you cede authority to a government body, you have ceded absolute authority to a government body. So when China swooped in and said, oh, well, Hong Kong doesn't have this worked out, but it's cool. We have sovereignty over Hong Kong. We'll just assume that authority. Hong Kong went, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. Nobody here agreed to this. We're not even real sure how this whole extradition thing is going to work out for us. So the fact that we'd have to have a discussion about how freedom and authority are both broad and narrow, how their applications can have a ton of nuance and yet be utterly black and white in the final analysis, well, we definitely don't want to have that discussion. And here's the other reason why they don't want to talk about these things. Apparently, the protesters are holding up signs that say things like, this is why countries should have the Second Amendment. They're waving Pepe flags. They're waving British flags. They're waving American flags.
They're singing the national anthem.
Yeah, they're singing
our national anthem.
That's correct. That's correct. They are so much a capitalist liberty state. I think it might even be a fair argument to say that Hong Kong at this point in time is more capitalist than the United States. And they are so much so this state of freedom, this state of individual freedom, this state of what the free market can accomplish. Companies like CNN and their ilk, any of the lefties, they would be forced to broadcast the success story that is Hong Kong. And they just don't want to do that because America is bad. America is the problem, especially when you get over to black and brown countries. Man, they hate us because all they've ever done is plunder our resources. So if suddenly, right in the middle of Asia, there's I guess maybe on the western edge of Asia, but whatever. But if right there in Asia, eastern edge of Asia, my map may be inverted in my brain. Anyhow, point being, excuse me, point being, they'd be forced to broadcast that their whole narrative about how other countries and quote unquote minorities hate America. No, actually, there's a lot of people all over the world that love America, that love the concept of British common law, which is the foundation for basically every liberal democracy that exists on the planet. And, well, we just can't show any of that in a positive light now, can we? But no, CNN, you go right ahead. Orange man bad.
Orange man bad. Orange man bad.
Yeah, the court of the NPCs.
All right. Well, I think that's the show for today. We will see you tomorrow morning for Totar Win Thursday. Y'all be safe out there.